Thank you. Ladies, gentlemen, dear friends, as English is not my native language, I will keep my paper. I hope it's fine for you. And maybe I will say some things which I repeat. But first, let me give you the best regards from the director of the Arts and Theatre Institute in Prague, Mrs. Pavla Petrova, who unfortunately can't be here with us in person, but with her personal support, the preparation of this exhibition would be more complicated. I would like to give my thanks especially to the hosting institution, the Columbus Museum of Art and its representatives, the director and her team, not just for organizing this exhibition, but also for their profound interest in the Czech theater art. In this context, I'd like to mention again exhibition called String Attached, the living tradition of Czech puppets, which was presented here in 2013. I have to notice that the reduced version of this exhibition is still touring all over the world. My thanks also belongs to all co-organizers of the exhibition. In the first place, the Ohio State University. And here is one person who initiated and realized all the events focused on the promotion of the Czech theater art in the United States, Joe Brandesky. It is necessary to underline that Shakespeare in Prague is the fifth exhibition, am I right, maybe? I hope. The fifth exhibition about Czech theater prepared by him. And it's now a big honor that the Arts and Theatre Institute was a partner on all these occasions. In fact, no exhibition about the history of the Czech theater can be done without the collections of the theater department of the National Museum in Prague. I'd like to give a personal thanks to the representatives of the National Museum who are present here today, Mr. Marek Junek, and Mr. Wojciech Poláček. I also would like to thank all the theaters, institutions, photographers, and of course, especially all the stage designers and costume designers who were so kind and lended us materials for this exhibition. Their list is so long for so short speech, but you can see her name or their name in the exhibits. Let me also mention the Ministry of Culture of the Czech Republic that has been continuously supporting the promotion of the Czech theater and culture abroad. And at the end of my speech, my big thanks go to three most important people connected to this exhibition, both curators, Vlasta Kaubská and Barbora Prihodova. Now I am better in pronunciation. And my colleague and producer of the exhibition, Martina Černá. They were able to cope with the enormous amount of material saved in collections and private collections and in Czech institutions and prepare the essence of staging Shakespeare not only in Prague, but in the whole Czech Republic. Just for your information, I count some numbers and there were 1,425 productions of Shakespeare's plays in the Czech theaters just after the World War II. So thank you, ladies. Thank you for your attention and please enjoy the Czech interpretation of Shakespeare.
All right, so now we get to hear from our curators, and be prepared to see Shakespeare through very, very fresh eyes on the global stage and through Czech eyes tonight. And I want to remind us all that one of the things that the arts do is enable us to talk across cultures, to understand the human experience as we all have it from the entire planet. And I think that this is never more important than it is today to realize that. And these kind of international collaborations allow us to understand each other better. Joe?
I guess that's me. Thank you, Nanette. I can't decide whether to stand or sit, but, you know, I'm a professor, so there it is. We have put together, I think, a pretty good picture of the kaleidoscope of performances that have been happening with Shakespeare in a land in Central Europe, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and a few other Central European. But a long time ago, there was a kingdom, and it was called Bohemia, and occupying the same space. And this business of Bohemia was that it was a Protestant kingdom. And at the same time, there was another big Protestant kingdom, and it was called England. And over in England, there was this guy named Shakespeare. And he was writing plays, and people were performing them, and companies were taking his performed plays out. And they went out as far as Bohemia in his lifetime. So when people ask me how long is the tradition of Shakespeare in Czech areas in Bohemia and Central Europe, it's concurrent with his life, which is the 17th century. Now, I'm not here to tell you that there were many great productions specifically of Shakespeare from the 17th into the 18th century, but I can pick it up thanks to the help of a colleague of mine, Pavel Drabek, who will be here on March the 2nd discussing his research about the history of Shakespeare in those lands. He's brilliant. He is the one who has inspired me certainly about the timeline of these kinds of productions, and we're very fortunate to have him come to visit. And he will also be a part of our symposium on the subject of Shakespeare in the Czech lands. He's the one who places the actual companies from London performing Shakespeare in the 17th century, before Shakespeare's death. But by the 19th century, Shakespeare is being used. There's no land of Bohemia anymore, and there's not yet a Czechoslovakia. It is Austria-Hungary. And the Czech peoples don't have an outlet for their own language. They would like to have their own language. They would like to rebuild some of the national and international prosperity that came with being Kingdom of Bohemia. And productions and many other kinds of activities led to the National Revival movement, in which performances could be played to help to establish a Czech sense, a uniquely Czech sense of the land as opposed to a Germanic sense, because they weren't just allowed to speak Czech in theaters, it had to be German. Next to that, you get to 1916. It's still Austria-Hungary. In 1916, it's the anniversary of Shakespeare's death, and so what do the Czechs do in the National Theater? Huge productions of Shakespeare. Many, many productions of Shakespeare, and you'll say, why? Partially because Shakespeare talks about many kinds of issues, political and human, that can be used to express the will and the ideas of people who may not be able to express them directly. Sub rosa, underneath the surface, Czech ideals were being expressed through performance of Shakespeare. This continues through the time of the Nazis in 1938. It continues through the time of the communists, a rather long period of time. And what you're seeing in some of these items in the exhibit are these expressions of who are we, what do we want to be through Shakespeare. I first got interested in this idea when I was in Russia, of all places, watching a production of Hamlet by a bunch of film actors, one of whom I knew, who placed me in the front row so she could play to me. A rather embarrassing moment, but during intermission I walked outside, talked to some of my colleagues at the Theater Museum in St. Petersburg, and they were livid. They were smoking cigarettes, they were pulling their hairs, and they said, "What have they done to our Shakespeare?" In Russian. Our, nash Shakespeare. And it was long before Barbara Prihodova came to me with an idea after the puppet exhibit about doing this one, right? Shakespeare in Prague, meaning Shakespeare for non-Anglophone audiences, people who are not hearing it in English, who are hearing it in translation. What is it that transcends, right? The cultures. There's something, I believe, in the ideas. There's something in the impulses, the humanity that is expressed. On all extremes, humanity at its best, humanity maybe not at its best, right? All understandable through translation and used at various times for various purposes. Because you could go past the censor, you could always say, it's only Shakespeare. I'm not saying it, Shakespeare said it, so it's okay, right? It has to be all right. And it worked for many generations. Now, post-communist Czech Republic, we still have audiences who are going to see productions of Shakespeare for different reasons, not so much geopolitical, maybe more personal, again, maybe more human. And through the two pieces of the exhibit, the historical part and the contemporary part, I think that story is told very well. What I want to do now is introduce Dr. Vlasta Kaubska, who will talk about just a few items from the historical part of the exhibit, and then Dr. Barbara Prihodova, who will talk about the contemporary part. Yeah? And afterwards, I hope we have some time for questions. I will welcome them. But now let's hear Vlasta, please.
Okay,
yeah?
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to say you something. If Joe Brandesky asked me a few years ago to prepare exhibition about stage and costume design in our country for Shakespeare, it was my pleasure. But when he told me it could be located in Columbus Museum of Art, it was really honor, not only for me, for Barbara, especially for Czech scenography. Thank you, Joe. Okay, allow me to tell a few words about one stage designer from this collection, about František Zelenka. František Zelenka, here is the name. He was a very nice man. When he was 22 years old student, he created very nice very nice performances in the National Theatre in 1926. It was a very new view of the scenography. It wasn't the historical view with the backdrops and wings and realistic painting. It was completely new view of the scenography. He was inspired by children wooden building kit. Basic idea was that the play on the stage is in fact the play of children. Production was invitation to escape from everyday life. The mission was to remind the beauty of times when we were everybody kids. In the costumes was not so important description of historical or geographical reality. Much more, it was poetic and humorous view of the contemporary world. It was a way to lighten the problems of life after the First World War. During the 18 years of Zelenka's theater activities, he made stage design for more than 130 productions. Being an artistic with a Jewish origin, he had to stop his artistic activities in 1939 due to the criminal Nuremberg laws. Zelenka spent the last 15 months of his life in the Terezin ghetto, where he participated in the preparation of 27 productions. He believed that his family would survive cruel conditions in Terezin and return back to the normal life. Unfortunately, he and his wife Gertruda and 8-year-old son Martin left Terezin in October 1944 and were transported to Auschwitz. They all passed away there. Illegal productions were arranged usually in the attics or cellars or barracks in Terezin. We are speaking about that because Zelenka prepared 2 Shakespeare's productions here, Richard III in 1943 and Measure for Measure in 1944. In his drawing on the notebook paper from the 19th June on 1943, Zelenka designed stage evoking Gothic style. The center stage is a basis for 3 staircases oriented to the platform with the emblem of the letter R, Richard III. The line of 4 columns with nooses gives a cruel impression of the stage and evoked the tragic situation in Terezin too. This artwork was created by special himself-made Indian ink from charred wood and egg white. This drawing illustrates one of the cruelest periods of modern human history, accompanied by William Shakespeare's works. It was a period in which human dignity was supposed to disappear and human values should have ceased to exist. Richard III, being one of the Shakespeare's the most sophisticated villains, is a comprehensible archetype of evil. Using the dramatic text, Jewish prisoners had the opportunity to remind themselves then it is not their case only, and any autocrat would be eventually defeated. So strong message is hidden in this small picture from sketchbook.
And now, finally, I would love to draw your attention to one of the productions in the contemporary section. When we speak about contemporary, we mean pretty much the last 30 years in my country's history, which of course is the time that is marked by the big change, the transition from the communist regime to democracy. So the ways of communicating have changed. Some of the topics have changed, the others remained. This production of King Lear was staged in 2011 at the National Theatre in Prague, which is the most prestigious stage, by director Jan Nebeský and costume and set designer Jana Prekova. These 2 artists are long-term collaborators, and they are usually seen as one of the most progressive, one of the most important but also controversial theater makers who have staged Shakespeare multiple times. And they usually push the boundaries about or how we think about staging Shakespeare. They push the conventions, they push the stereotypes. The productions that they create are usually either loved or hated. I've seen these productions a couple of times. Every time, half of the audience, exactly half of the audience leaves in the intermission. And the other half gives them standing ovations. So you can imagine I was in the second half, so I'm a huge fan. So as you can see on this picture, the history still haunts us. It's still present with us. This is an image of King Lear in the moment when he had already denounced his beloved daughter Cordelia, where he's been kind of thrown on the street by his other 2 daughters. He has embarked on this transformative journey. He's starting to realize the mistakes that he'd made by himself, accompanied by his fool, obviously costumed as a concentration camp prisoner. This is an image from the opening scene of this production. As you will see, it was staged by the swimming pool. So this is the place by the swimming pool where the whole competition for the king's appraisal from the daughters begins. We see the daughters dressed in their swimming suits, ready to jump on the to step up on the springboards and jump into the swimming pool. And this is also the moment when they do, and then Cordelia says, "I'm not gonna do it." And the whole drama begins, the whole drama unfolds. We have a beautiful model, a reconstruction of the design in the exhibition. And when you go to see that, you will see that a big part of that setting was also projections that accompanied the actors. And on those projections, you will see that the two evil, malicious sisters, Goneril and Regan, have been transformed into symbols of the two oppressive regimes that the Czechs faced during the 20th century, the Nazism and the communism. So that's another way, I guess, to deal with the past that we can see in the productions. And lastly, I think, pretty telling final scene of the play. And this was actually the idea of the designer, which only tells you how strong the designers are within the Czech tradition, sometimes taking on the role of not only the director, but maybe the playwright a little bit, where they decided to transpose the final scene and set it up in an art gallery, where all the characters, yes, stroll around as, I'm sorry, sometimes a little bit indifferent visitors to the galleries, a little bit bored, want to be stylish, want to be all artsy, but of course it's none of you, all these people, but I'm talking about different kind of visitors. So they stroll around, and you will see Cordelia/Fool, this double figure, and Lear being hanged as one of the artifacts in the gallery. And the characters strolling around them indifferently. Nobody cares. So this is kind of the Lear that we have. The character had undergone a transformation, but the catharsis does not happen. Nobody cares. This is the ending. Cordelia and Lear hang there. So yeah, that's the contemporary Shakespeare that we have. Thank you.